Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully you all are having a wonderful day today. So I thought that we would somewhat review this video. This video is going to be by this one boxing channel named AkiTV. And if you know what the allegations about Canelo Alvarez have been lately from the LDBC and the new media channels, you know that they've been saying that Canelo Alvarez is basically avoiding top black fighters, or that he's avoiding top fighters. But once again, these LDBC and these new media channels, they only care usually about the black American fighters. And to a degree, there's nothing wrong with that. But the problem comes in when you're very biased and you're very over emotional and you try and tear down certain fighters to make others look better. Now, these allegations against Canelo, to where he'll fight easier fights instead of taking the tougher ones, there is some truth to that. And I do like Canelo. Canelo, in my opinion, right now is the #1 pound for pound fighter. But there is a reason why Canelo Alvarez at one point in time fought Liam Smith and Amir Khan and a certain amount of these other fighters. All right? When it comes down to the overall. However, the problem I have with this channel, with AkiTV, is that he is very pro-racial. Once again, these channels, they are pro-black. And a certain amount of people are not going to like that. I have no problem with a certain amount of people saying that Canelo Alvarez here and there is taking easier fights than he should. And I don't think this most recent fight is a good example, because I think Callum Smith was a very challenging opponent. But when it comes down to the overall, they only bring up Demetrius Andrade and Jermall Charlo especially. You know, and now, of course, they're starting to bring up David Benavidez, but you notice they don't bring up Artur Beterbiev or Dimitri Bivol or Billy Joe Saunders, who also are decently accomplished fighters, or at least around the same level, you know, if not more than a Demetrius Andrade and a Jermall Charlo. Of course, you know, Artur Beterbiev is the most accomplished out of any of those fighters. But let's just see overall what Aki has to say, because these guys have been alleging for a very long time that Jermall Charlo has apparently, allegedly, wanted this big fight with Canelo Alvarez. And personally, to be honest with you, I don't think Jermall Charlo wants any of these big fights. But maybe that's just me. Anyways, let's see what he has to say.
Floyd Mayweather's CEO, Leonard Allaby, he came out saying that Charlo is all wrong for Canelo Alvarez stylistically. I mean, even Canelo Alvarez will tell you that because he requested a French fries belt, equivalence of that belt you purchased.
Let me tell you this, man. And a certain amount of people overall may not like this. I think when it comes to Jermall Charlo especially, I think a certain amount of people, if Canelo Alvarez and Jermall Charlo, I think if they do get into the ring with each other, I think a lot of people are going to learn that Jermall Charlo is tailor-made for Canelo Alvarez. That's just what I see. Now, it could be wrong. But when it comes down to it, I just don't see any way that Jermall Charlo can beat Canelo Alvarez. I don't see him knocking Canelo Alvarez out. I don't see him outboxing Canelo Alvarez. I don't think he has the skills to beat Canelo Alvarez. I don't think he has the physical abilities to beat Canelo Alvarez. That's not saying that Jermall Charlo is not a great athlete. I think he is a great athlete, and I think he is a great boxer. But Canelo is just a few levels above a Jermall Charlo. Anyway.
From Walmart in order to keep your pants up. Canelo will tell you that. Because if Canelo felt any different, he would have been fought Charlo. New media is not the only people criticizing.
Well, when it comes down to it, Jermall Charlo apparently was offered a contract not too long ago against Canelo Alvarez to fight him for $8 million. And what the LDBC's and new media's response was that was a lowball offer. Which I don't know how it can be a lowball offer when that's the most amount of money that you've ever made. But apparently with this alleged deal that Deontay Wilder offered Anthony Joshua for $50 million in America, when Anthony Joshua was the A side and wanted it to happen in Britain, apparently they had no problem with that. You know, which once again shows you, you know, where their motivations lie. They care about the American black fighters. All right, they are pro-black, but they do not care about the European or foreign black fighters. Well, they like the Cuban black fighters, but they don't like the European black fighters. Their allegiance lies with the Caribbean black fighters and the American black fighters. So it is what it is. Anyway.
Criticizing Canelo for not fighting Jermall Charlo, and Demetrius Andrade. to this day.
Now, why are they only bringing up Demetrius Andrade and Jermall Charlo? Because Canelo Alvarez has came out before, and once again, with certain people alleging that Canelo Alvarez is avoiding certain fights. I don't necessarily have a problem with that. But when it comes down to why are they only bringing up Demetrius Andrade and Jermall Charlo? Why not a Billy Joe Saunders as well? Basically what they're saying is that Canelo Alvarez is not the real deal unless he beats these top-tier black fighters, is what they're saying. That's basically what they're saying. And there's a lot of dominant black fighters in the sport. Usually when it comes to the most dominant fighters in the sport, usually it would be a black American fighter. But Jermall Charlo and Demetrius Andrade, they are not Floyd Mayweather. And when it comes down to the overall bottom line is this, I think that Demetrius Andrade and Jermall Charlo, I personally don't believe that they would beat a Canelo Alvarez. Now, Demetrius Andrade might have more of a chance against Canelo Alvarez than, say, a Jermall Charlo just because he is defensively sound and is very slippery. But when it comes to a Jermall Charlo, I just don't see it. And a certain amount of people may not agree. But I'll explain it as this video goes along.
He's not the only one criticizing Canelo. Legends, Mexican legends, in fact, from Chavez Sr. to Barrera, Morales, Marquez, Oscar De La Hoya, Hopkins, they all told Canelo Alvarez, if you want to be great, fight the likes of Charlo and Andrade. And
well, no offense, but some of those guys, let's be real, they are hating on Canelo Alvarez. Now listen, to be great, Canelo Alvarez is going to have to consistently fight great fights, but let me tell you this, Canelo Alvarez is already great. This notion that Canelo Alvarez hasn't fought any A-class fighters or all this other bullshit, Canelo at one point in time fought Gennady Golovkin, who was a top 3 pound-for-pound guy at the time. Now, whether you agree with that or whether you don't agree with that, Gennady Golovkin was smashing through people in the middleweight division. Now, I'm not saying that a lot of those guys were A-class fighters, but a lot of people would also say that the win over Sergey Kovalev that Andre Ward had a couple of years ago also warranted Andre Ward as being the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter, and I have no problem with that. But if you want to make the argument that Gennady Golovkin was his hype job, who's saying that Sergey Kovalev was not a hype job? Because who really did Sergey Kovalev beat besides a 49-year-old Bernard Hopkins and a Jean Pascal? to be quite honest with you. So, overall, I think it's fair to say that Sergey Kovalev at the time was an A-class fighter. And also, I believe Gennady Golovkin at the time was an A-class fighter. And Gennady Golovkin at this point in time in his career against elite fighters, he's done. So, he's been done ever since that Canelo Alvarez rematch. But it is what it is.
Canelo haven't did so to this day. I just show you that Canelo knows these two brothers were cut from a different cloth from the jump. That's why he didn't want to hop into the Lions Den. Skill, recognize skill. Regardless of all these decaps that make all time type of excuses that Canelo is not even making, claiming, oh, who have they fought? They haven't did this, they haven't.
Well, let me tell you this, because these brothers are so allegedly serious. Jermall Charlo is so apparently serious about taking the Canelo Alvarez fight. Not only do I believe he was offered a contract, and now not only do I believe that he changed his story because he did, but when it came down to the overall bottom line is this. If Jermall Charlo is truly serious about facing the Canelo Alvarez, why not face a Demetrius Andrade to get to Canelo Alvarez? If you believe that you have to trap him in a corner. That's just the bottom line. But he was not even willing to take a Demetrius Andrade fight. This is how I know he is not serious about taking any of these big fights. Why not go over and sign with DAZN? Eddie Hearn apparently offered you a deal. And went to the LDBC and new media said, well, why did he offer him it over email? Why did he even, why does he have to go over to DAZN? You have to go over to DAZN because that's where the middleweights are at. That's where Gennady Golovkin is. That's where Danny Jacobs is. That's where Demetrius Andrade is. That's where Canelo Alvarez is. If you want to face the big boys, maybe you should go over to DAZN and fight over at DAZN. It's kind of like Terrence Crawford. If Terrence Crawford wants to face the elite welterweights and get in the big boy pool, instead of signing with Top Rank, why don't you sign with PBC? Because that's where all the elite welterweights are. Anyway.
Did that, but then Canelo Alvarez fights a Rocky Fielding. You know what I'm saying? Making all of their points irrelevant. All their excuses get brushed off the table.
I have no problem with that, Aki. I have no problem with you saying that. The problem I have is that you're not keeping the same energy with everybody. Because Jermall Charlo faced Sergey Derevyanchenko last match when he could have potentially faced a Demetrius Andrade, when he did not want to take that fight. And apparently, once again, he was offered a contract against Canelo Alvarez for $8 million, and apparently it was a low ball offer. Now Charlo, months after these allegations, says that he was never offered a contract. I don't believe him, and a certain amount of other people do not either. Anyway.
Canelo brushes all their excuses and tells them, hey, make up some more excuses for me. He becoming the champion of excuses. Now,
well, no, sir. The champion of excuses is actually Deontay Wilder. He holds that crown. Or that belt, whatever you want to say. Anyway.
The reason why Charlo is all wrong for Canelo Alvarez, it's not too many fighters that have the whole package. Jermall Charlo, for example, he have a great chin. He's very fast. He's very sharp. He's a powerful puncher. He's very strong physically. He's a smart fighter, skillful. So when you combine all of that with his size and his reach and his jab that he brings to the table, where it's sharp, you can't even counter it pretty much. It's very, very sharp.
Jermall Charlo has a decent jab. It's nowhere near what you're trying to make it out to be. I'm going to say this once. A certain amount of people overall are going to be very surprised if that fight happens, because I believe that it eventually will happen. I think a lot of people are going to be surprised at how dominant Canelo was going to be in that fight. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I have no problem admitting that I'm wrong. You know, I'm not saying that I have not been wrong before, but I just don't see it from Jermall Charlo, man. I just don't see it. I think Jermall Charlo is tailor-made for Canelo Alvarez. He is going to be basically a littler version of Callum Smith. He does not throw enough. He does not have enough head movement. He is not A-class on the back foot. You know, when it comes down to it overall, he does not have enough volume punching. It is what it is. I just don't see him beating Canelo Alvarez. He is an accurate puncher. He is a good counter puncher. He does have good power. Basically what he reminds me of, is a littler version of Callum Smith. That's what he reminds me of. Anyway.
And for a short fighter like Canelo Alvarez, he's not going to be able to get away from Charlo's jab. Remember, Floyd Mayweather...
We'll see about that.
But one of the punches that Floyd Mayweather was connecting with Canelo Alvarez all night was the jab. And Floyd Mayweather is not as big as Jermall Charlo. Not even close.
Well, a certain amount of these LDBC and pro-racial channels that I've seen out here overall that have been trying to tear down Canelo Alvarez's career, they say he actually does better against bigger opponents. So which one is it? You know, let me tell you this, man. Canelo usually does have a problem avoiding a jab. Although in his last fight, he didn't seem to have that problem at all. Do I see Jermall Charlo's jab giving Canelo problems? I mean, it could potentially, but I just don't see it. When it comes down to it over, and a certain amount of people might disagree, but it is what it is. When it comes down to it, Canelo looked a hell of a lot more improved in that last fight against Callum Smith, and Callum Smith had like an 8-inch reach advantage. So it is what it is. I just don't see the problems that Jermall Charlo is apparently going to give Canelo Alvarez. I just don't see it. You know, I don't think he has enough power. And he is a very good puncher. I don't think that he has the skill set to be the Canelo Alvarez the way many people think that he does. But it is what it is. Anyway.
And Floyd Mayweather was smacking.
And Jermall Charlo is nowhere near Floyd Mayweather. And let me tell you this. Canelo has not just had problems with the jab against the Floyd. He also had the problems against Arasani Lara. He also had the problems against Gennady Golovkin. Those are the 3 biggest fights of his career. And you can actually debate that he lost all 3 of them. But anyway.
Canelo Alvarez all night with the jab. Canelo didn't have no answer for that jab. So that's why he don't like that Jermall Charlo fight stylistically, because of that jab of Charlo, since he had the best jab in the game.
Well, not really. he doesn't really have the best jab in the game. And to be quite honest with you, when it comes to the 3 fighters that are the middleweight top contenders, between Demetrius Andrade, Jermall Charlo, and Billy Joe Saunders, I believe that Billy Joe Saunders might actually have the most trouble to give Canelo Alvarez. Just because he is very slippery, he's very maneuverable, great footwork, great movement. I think he has better movement and is harder to hit than both Demetrius Andrade and Jermall Charlo. And him and Jermall Charlo are very similarly accomplished. Demetrius Andrade is extremely inexperienced against elite level competition. And to me, he's just a little bit too hittable. But he is very talented.
A sharp, stiff, heavy, hard jab a snappy jab that you can't even counter. That's going to keep the short.
Well, we'll see about that. I believe it's going to be a little bit easier to counter that jab and avoid that jab by Canelo than you think, or excuse me, by Charlo than you think. But maybe I'm wrong.
Canelo Alvarez at bay. Canelo Alvarez knows that stylistically that's all wrong for him. And then
because let me tell you this, Gennady Golovkin had a better jab than Jermall Charlo. And a lot of people are not going to like that. You know, these channels are trying to propose that Gennady Golovkin was this hype job, but then yet again at the same time, they won't call Deontay Wilder a hype job. I wonder why that is. We already know the answer, as as Dante's Boxing Nation, who's a part of new media, would say. We know what time it is. All right, we know where their motivations lie. You know, I just don't see what problems Jermall Charlo is going to give Canelo. I just really don't. But it is what it is.
He does cut off the gap and come in to the inside. Man, you saw Charlo last night or Saturday night. He ain't on no Gennady Golovkin. He ain't going to rep that Mexican style, and when it's time to go Mexican style, he's not going to go Mexican style.
So what you're telling me is that even if Canelo Alvarez starts going to the body, starts beating him up on the inside, what you're telling me is that Jermall Charlo is going to push him back? He's going to continue to push him back? Okay, we'll see how that goes. I don't see Jermall Charlo being able to beat Canelo Alvarez on the inside. I don't see him being able to get him on the outside either. Once again, I don't think Jermall Charlo throws enough. And you have to throw a decent amount of volume to defeat Canelo Alvarez. That, or you have to be a very accurate puncher. Once again, Jermall Charlo reminds me of a littler version of Callum Smith. They both have similar issues and similar strengths. Both very good, on the inside, good little counter punchers. On the inside, they don't throw enough. They don't have enough head movement. It is what it is.
Yurchenko beat Gennady Golovkin worse than Canelo Alvarez did. He beat...
In my opinion, I thought Golovkin won that fight by a smidge. But you could debate that Derevyanchenko won that fight. But anyway.
Gennady Golovkin in a better fashion. And Charlo
Now, Charlo might be able to fight on the back foot better than Gennady Golovkin. But he cannot fight on the front foot as Gennady Golovkin. He does not have the power that Golovkin has. He does not have the jab that Golovkin has. And to be honest, they both have similar movement because Golovkin and Charlo are not the greatest of movers. But it is what it is.
Completely dominated Derevyanchenko. The same man that beat...
And let's admit, that is a good win by Charlo, but that is not an A-class win. Derevyanchenko is a guy that has lost every big fight in his career. And no offense, but Gennady Golovkin has pretty much been done. It's very clear that Gennady Golovkin has been done, at least against elite competition, ever since that Canelo Alvarez rematch. It took everything that he had out of him.
Gennady Golovkin and got robbed. The same man, Canelo Alvarez, vacated his IBF strap in order to avoid. And Charlo washed him. What happened when Derevyanchenko came in the inside? Just like Floyd Mayweather, Charlo showed his class. He was pretty calm. He did not panic, even though that's his game. That's Derevyanchenko's game, is the inside work.
Sergey Derevyanchenko is a very decent fighter on the inside, but he's not an A-class fighter. He's a very slow starter. He usually gets knocked down or hurt early on in the fight, and then comes back a little bit in the middle, later rounds. Gave Danny Jacobs about good 4 rounds, I'm trying to think what else. Gave Golovkin pretty much a done version of Golovkin, a very good fight, So it's a decent win. I'm not trying to degrade the win, but that's not really an A-class win.
And he caught Derevyanchenko with beautiful right uppercuts. I believe 2 attributes that Jermall Charlo have that stand out of the bunch in the sport of boxing is his jab and also his right uppercut. I believe the best jab...
He has a decent jab. His uppercut actually is very A-class. That I will agree with. But would I necessarily say that that's going to be enough to beat Canelo Alvarez? No. Canelo does not get countered very often. I'll just say that.
Jab and the best right uppercut in the game, they belong to...
He certainly has one of the best right uppercuts. That I will agree with. Would I say that he has the best right uppercut? I think you could debate that the best right uppercut goes to Anthony Joshua. Debatably. Jermall Charlo is also up there. Canelo also was up there. Canelo has a very good right uppercut. He has a very great counter right uppercut. But anyway.
Jermall Charlo. So, in the distance, that jab going to be a problem, especially that 1-2. Then, if Canelo does cut off the gap, That right uppercut, that's a Hail Mary uppercut that could possibly put Canelo to sleep.
I highly doubt that. And that's not me saying that it can happen, but if Gennady Golovkin could not counter, Canelo Alvarez, very often I don't see Jermall Charlo being able to. Now, of course, styles make fights, but Jermall Charlo is not too far off from Gennady Golovkin. Once again, he does not have the best movement. Once again, Jermall Charlo to me reminds me a little bit of a littler version of Callum Smith. That's what he reminds me of. But anyway.
Now, what does Canelo Alvarez have to lose if he fight Charlo? To be honest with you, I mean, I don't understand what kind of cojones does Canelo Alvarez have. Does he have none? Because it's been 5 years and he's been ducking Jermall Charlo, requesting franchise belts. You got to keep in mind, you have the referee on your side. You have the judges in your pocket. The event will be yours. You the A side. You robbed Lara. You robbed Gennady Golovkin according to most.
Now, did you hear what he just said? You robbed Lara and you robbed Gennady Golovkin according to most. Now, why did he say with Gennady Golovkin that you robbed them according to most? Because Golovkin is a Caucasian fighter. And remember, they had to tear Golovkin down, so we can't just come out and say that they robbed them the first time around, which they did, because Canelo Alvarez did not win that first fight. But it is what it is. Anyway.
Nearly robbed Floyd Mayweather getting spanked every single round.
And I will agree with that. That Mayweather fight was, I cannot believe the scorecards were that close. I mean, it's very clear that Oscar was greasing the palms of them judges. Allegedly, but it is what it is. All right. Well, that's just my opinion on the situation. Anyway.
So as long as you don't get knocked out, you could possibly rob Jermall Charlo. So what you tripping?
Well, here's the thing. I'm not going to say that Canelo Alvarez has robbed every opponent. There has been some questionable decisions, but Canelo has won a decent amount of fights in his career. He beat Danny Jacobs fairly. He beat Gennady Golovkin in the rematch fairly. You could argue, even though you could argue that Lara won, you could argue that Canelo Alvarez deserved to win that fight because maybe you wanted to say that, that Lara could have threw more. It is what it is.
It's what's mind-boggling to me at this point. But like I said, Canelo Alvarez really have no confidence in himself, and his own fans don't have no confidence in Canelo because if they did, they will be pushing Canelo to prove them right and tell Canelo, you know what? Quit ducking Jermall Charlo and face your fears in order to be the...
Once again, and here's the problem. If you want to allege that he is avoiding a Jermall Charlo, once again, I don't think Jermall Charlo is serious about taking these big fights. And Canelo Alvarez overall does pick and choose certain fights. A certain amount of people are not going to like that. Yes, he does do that. But when it comes down to it, Jermall Charlo, here's the problem I have. If you're going to criticize Canelo, you also have to criticize Jermall Charlo. Because Jermall Charlo also is doing the same thing. Jermall Charlo could have fought Demetrius Andre, but he decided not to do that. So it is what it is.
Best, you gotta fight the best. Jermall Charlo fought the second best in his division. We know Jermall is the number 154 pounder. He fought Rosario, the second best in his division. That's what's supposed to happen in the sport of boxing. On the PBC side, the two best middleweights are Jermall and Derevyanchenko. They fought each other. On the other hand, we still waiting on Canelo Alvarez to do something. He want to fight Ivini coming off a loss for Benavidez WBC strap. He said...
And didn't Jermall Charlo just fight Sergey Derevyanchenko coming off of a loss? Even though he gave Golovkin a very tough fight? So it is what it is.
Benavidez is Mexican. That's why he don't want to fight Benavidez. Meanwhile, he fought Angulo. He fought Lopez. They were all Mexicans. He fought Chavez. He was Mexican, wasn't he? But if it's a good Mexican fighter that could fight, then, oh, no, I don't fight my people. What you mean? The tradition, what you going to just stop the tradition? The Mexican tradition from the Barrera, Morales, Marquez, and all them great wars? The toe-to-toe action? Now, all of a sudden, when you got a brother that could fight, you got a meat that could...
David Benavidez is another overrated fighter as well. I don't see David Benavidez beating Canelo Alvarez either. A lot of people are going to say, well, he's going to come forward. He's not going to... Well, you feel Canelo Alvarez's power, and then you continue going forward. You go ahead and continue going forward when that happens. Because a lot of people think they're going to go forward and go to the body of Canelo Alvarez, and then they start feeling those body shots or that power, and they say, wow, this dude can really hit, and I'm not hitting him a whole lot. And on top of that, Benavidez is very straightforward, which happens with a lot of Mexican fighters especially. He's very straightforward. He doesn't have a lot of head movement. He does not have superb defense. That would be an interesting fight, but I would also bet on Canelo Alvarez to win that one.
Fight. You got an Aki that can fight. Now all of a sudden, oh, I don't want to fight my Aki. I got love for my Aki. When you don't even know Benavidez, when you never supported Benavidez. Meanwhile,
hey, well, you know what? That's no problem when it comes down to the overall. Then I need to hear the same energy when it comes to Terence Crawford and Sean Porter. Once again, this is not me trying to defend Canelo Alvarez relentlessly. This is just me trying to say that you have to keep the same energy everywhere. No problem with that. But then the next time Terence Crawford comes up with this bullshit about Sean Porter overall being my friend and that's why we can't fight, no problem. Just say the same shit for Terence Crawford versus Sean Porter. But we all know you're not going to do that because you have to try to allege that Terence Crawford is the #1 pound-for-pound fighter. But anyway.
Jermall Charlo talking about fighting Benavidez and moving up a weight to fight Benavidez because he cut from the lion cloth. He a lion only. He want to hop.
You know, yeah, allegedly, according to the LDBC and new media. Anyway.
Into the lion's den. Charlo told Canelo Alvarez, I'll fight you in Mexico City. Translation. I'm more Mexican than you.
I'm more Mexican than you. You expect me to believe that Jermall Charlo wanted to fight Canelo Alvarez in Mexico City, but he's not even willing to fight Demetrius Andrade on the zone? I believe that one.
More Mexican heart than you do. If I'm willing to do that.
And once again, this is how you know if someone like Errol Spence was serious about his business. You know, he forced Kell Brook into a corner. He forced Sean Porter into a corner. And then Danny Garcia and a certain amount of these other fighters all of a sudden want to fight him now because now he's the man at 147 because he's got all the belts. You know, and now everyone wants to fight him because he's the piece of the pie, you know, or the main piece of the pie that everybody wants now. All right? But it is what it is. All right? Errol Spence has always been about his business. Someone like a Jermall Charlo, he can allege that he's all about this, all about that, but you're not even willing to fight a Demetrius Andrade? The people overall that are put into a precarious position or put into a position overall to where they may not get the big fights, they understand that, you know, how to get the bigger fights. That they need to face someone overall, you know, to get the bigger fights. They need to face greater competition or similar opponents. Jermall Charlo was not doing that. He's not even willing to fight a Demetrius Andrade. You expect me to believe that he was willing to fight, truly willing to fight Canelo Alvarez in Mexico City? This dude has been all bark and no bite for the past, I don't know how many years. But anyway.
And we already know the huge Hispanic community in Texas. And Canelo still ducking to this day. It's making these Canelo fans look extremely horrible, to say the least, like I said.
Showing his Deontay Wilder fanboy ways again. Anyway.
Subscribe below if you're trying to get smart about it.
But that's really about it for today. I don't completely disagree with the key that Canelo Alvarez might pick fights here and there. The problem I have is that you cannot necessarily say that he is being avoided or that Jermall Charlo is being avoided by Canelo. Because Jermall Charlo is doing a lot of the same shit. Jermall Charlo is not fighting anyone elite. And he could have had the opportunity to do that, but he declined. So it is what it is. But once again, you know, there's a reason why they only bring up the black American fighters. These channels are pro-black. So it is what it is. That's really about it for today. Thanks so much for watching. I'll talk to y'all later, and we'll see if this fight happens later on down the road. But we'll see. That's really about it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll talk to y'all later.